Hi, and welcome to another in our podcast series. Now what? My name is Dale. For thanks so much for being with us. My guest this morning is attorney at law Lynette Eastmond, and she has worked both in the public and private sector of Barbados. She obtained a Bachelor of Laws from the UWI and a Master's from the University of London, and she's been a researcher for the International Fiscal Association. She's been a senior international tax manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers. She also headed a corporate division in Barbados, and she served as a senator, director of international business, minister of commerce, a lead negotiator with the regional negotiating machinery. She's also been a vice president of the Barbados Bar Association, president of the Barbados Film and Video Association, and leader of the United Progressive Party, and she's also a film producer. So she's very well equipped to talk to us this morning about collaborating in business and why that is so important and how you can collaborate. So hi Lynette, thanks so much for being
Hi.
here with us. We really
Hi, good
appreciate it.
morning. Thanks for having me.
No,
It's a
when we
pleasure to be here.
yes, thank you. When we had our first conversation, you talked to me about well, you mentioned to me about collaborating and you wanted to share information about collaborating. So when people hear collaborating, they have so many different interpretations of it. So in what context were you speaking about collaborating?
Well, as you said, there are many ways that you can collaborate, and I do encourage individuals to collaborate in whichever way they can. I think that that's the solution for small countries and for small businesses. And we can see that around the world, there are all methods of collaboration used, even within large countries. So for us, in our very small space, I mean, within Barbados, most of our businesses are small businesses. I think it is very important to collaborate. With respect to this particular form of collaboration that I mentioned to you, I was thinking about the cooperative, and that is one of the means of collaboration which is available to Barbadians. The cooperative which we know best is the financial cooperative, which is the credit union. And as we can see, those have become very successful. And I think it would be important for Barbadians and your listenership to be reminded, because it is now part of our history, and we're not very good at relaying our history. But those credit unions did not start with the large edifices that we now see. They
Mm-hmm.
started with people with not even briefcases. They used to call them valises,
Mm-hmm.
walking around collecting money from individuals. And they also started with what people may call the ordinary Barbadian who does the extraordinary thing. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't necessarily the people at the top who were the drivers and the movers and shakers in these organizations in the when the credit union started.
So how would we translate that now into modern day? Because when you talk about cooperatives and we see the examples that you spoke about, but then we hear people talk about pyramid schemes and all of these different things. So say for example, members of our group at Star Not Strategy said that they wanted to start a cooperative. What are some of the first things that they have to do?
Well, one of the first things would be to meet with the cooperatives department. And despite the fact that it has now become the culture
Mm-hmm.
to be very critical of our civil service, I would say that the cooperatives department does a very good job. I, of course, came in connection with the cooperatives department when I was the Minister of Commerce. And they have a tradition where they make it their business to go out to meet you. They don't necessarily just sit in the office. And when I met them, that is what they were doing. And even though some of the officers that were there when I was minister have now retired or moved on to another position, they continue that tradition, because I think it was either last year or year before, I got a group of individuals together who were interested in cooperatives, and I invited them to my office and I invited the cooperatives department. And two of them came out and they made very detailed presentations as to how the cooperative works, and I was very impressed with that. That is their culture. That is the culture within their organization. It isn't just one person. So when that one person goes on, they continue to do that. So the first port of call for me that I would recommend is the cooperatives department.
Okay. So once you've met with the cooperatives, but even before we get to cooperatives, I should have asked you, are there specific businesses that should be said that they want to have a cooperative, or it can be any businesses? Because I'm sure that's one of the things that the department would ask. So
Yeah.
how do you determine um, what this cooperative is going to serve?
Essentially it can be any business, as long as the individuals have some kind of and this is not a requirement, but I mean you should have some common purpose. And I think there are some well-known cooperatives other than the credit unions. I'm sure people have heard of the Pig Farmers Cooperative. There is a farmers cooperative, that one in St. George. I think people know that one.
Mm-hmm.
There are some taxi cooperatives as well that have done very well. And one of the taxi cooperatives, for example, these were individuals who drove taxis for a living, came together. And when they came together, what they were able to do is to buy some coaches. So it means then that their income wasn't solely dependent on whether I could drive my car today, but they could also earn income on their investments. And this becomes more important as individuals grow older. When individuals are young, they tend to have this feeling that they're always going to be young because even when they're 40, they still feel as though they're 20. So they kind of think that that's going to go on forever, but history shows that it doesn't. So when you're not able, if you've invested and it is an investment, you have to invest in the cooperative. If you've invested in the cooperative and you have shares in the cooperative, and the day comes that you can no longer drive, for example, you could still get an income or be paid a dividend when dividends can be paid on your investment. So to me, it is a smart choice, which unfortunately has not been promoted in Barbados as much as it should have. I had raised this question with someone a while back, talking about the history of the cooperative, and they felt that maybe it came along at a time when everyone was very nervous about being seen as a communist. So cooperative was associated, coming together and working together in a cooperative fashion was seen as communist. And even whether people knew what communism was or not, they were bitterly against it because that was the culture that the world intended to create for people to have that negative feeling, even without knowing what it was. So this is what was explained to me. I don't know if it is true or not,
Right.
but certainly the cooperative, in my view, has that potential. And I was talking to someone from the cooperative department, and he said, yes, there are cooperatives for which we have oversight. Annually, they pay dividends to their members, so they are working.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the objectives? Any grouping of people thinking of having a cooperative? What are some of the objectives? You mentioned some looking towards the future and planning for old age. Of course, that is a very important objective. But what are some of the other objectives that they should pay attention to, or at least have in the back of their mind?
Okay, so most people, most people, when they have a business, there are certain things that they need to do. Um, so, for example, if well, if we look at the taxis, for example, or we look at the big farmers, um, there are certain things that you need to do in your business. There are certain inputs that you require.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have 20 people in a group and they all require the same inputs, and they're going to come together and buy those inputs together, you recognize then that your all kinds of things are better for you. You can buy in larger quantities. So hopefully, if you can buy in larger quantities, your price should come down. It means then that you're able to share resources, including time. So, for example, if one person among you was allocated to seek out the inputs, it means that you could seek out inputs in Barbados, you could seek out inputs abroad in different jurisdictions, spend some time determining what is the best outcome for the cooperative in terms of price, quality, variety, etc. And if one of you, say, were allocated to do that, then it would be better because then the others could go off and be doing something else to the benefit of the whole. But
Mm-hmm.
usually, what happens in many of our small businesses is that that one person does everything. So those are those are two advantages there. In one, that you can allocate your resources, including time and personnel, to do one task for the entire group. And in
Mm-hmm.
terms of input, you could be looking at better prices, better quality, have scope to look at better varieties in terms of your input. Now,
Mm-hmm.
then when it comes to making your product, depending on what it is, you have to look at the ability to deliver. If, for example, I don't know, because for example, there are lots of people who might have some fruits and they might be thinking, oh, in mango season we have so many mangoes, but what do we do with them? A lot of them actually end up on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if people decided that they wanted to get into processing and you had to invest in equipment for processing, it is going to be difficult for one person to invest in that equipment, but several people coming together could do so. And you would, I wouldn't say simply because I guess nothing is simply, but you could come together and then make arrangements as to how the equipment would be used.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you set the times, etc., but you would all be going to one place using the equipment, and then you could the equipment could be used over time. Because if this is successful, if you could set up, I mean, there are lots of people who love mango juice, for example, but they don't really want to go through the process of actually, getting the juice from the mango. I might be
Mm-hmm.
a person, I might have several mango trees. I would prefer, because then you might start out as 10 people with fruit trees. But then when I understand that this thing has been set up, the thing about it is that you want to keep it going. So then you
Mm-hmm.
might put out an ad and say, well, we do processing. So then it's not just for you, but it is for me. I might be able to come, I might be able to go outside, get my mangoes that usually the birds just pick some of them and then I just throw away the rest and eat what I can and my relatives and whatever. I can bring those to you now and you can either sell them to you at your price and you process them in order for you to make money, um, for the cooperative. So when you come together in whichever area, because I've given you different examples, you can work together then to expand your business, because this will be another aspect. Now, before it was just you growing fruits,
Mm-hmm.
but now you can actually acquire fruits from other people and use it in process and plant. So if you have this processor, and this is another thing, somebody could go and do the research about what processors are available out there
Mm-hmm.
for fruit juice making. And as we encourage individuals to grow more fruit trees and they have excess, you would might find yourself in a position where the processing plant, and when I say plant, don't imagine necessarily that it's as big as Robert's Manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it could be a small plant in a house somewhere, but for the time, it's producing enough for you. And over time, you could encourage planting more fruit trees of different varieties so that it keeps going all year. So that is an advantage in terms of making your product whatever it is. Then there's distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to distribution, um, it means what usually happens. I mean, and you see it on Facebook and Instagram and wherever else. You see one person with a business and they're doing their best to try to promote it using all of these different methods, and everybody else out there is doing the same thing. And it's a simple thing. But what would happen if you had 10 or 20 people all promoting the same thing? Because what you can do within your cooperative is that you keep your footprint. You keep your Facebook page, you keep your Instagram, you keep doing what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
but no, you do it for yourself and you do it for the cooperative.
Right.
So even when we talk about distribution, even say for example, with your fruit juice, if you made fresh fruit juice
Mm-hmm.
and you were going to go somewhere and set up, um, understand that then it is 10 of you plus your family members and your friends. So it's your 10 people multiplied all along by all of your family, the 10 of you, all of your family, and all of your friends. So can you imagine the turnout you could have? And then you do your normal Facebook advertising
Mm-hmm.
where other people who see it will come. But can you imagine how you would be able to expand the reach by just working together instead of one person trying to promote their particular good or service?
Yeah. I like the fact that you talked about sharing resources because anytime you talk about collaboration or even working together and you talk about making a contribution of doing your part of putting in, some people feel that it's just enough for them to put in money and that is it. Yes, you have to invest in that way, but you can also invest in resources and time and contact and those kinds of things. If you can just expand on that because someone may say, well, I don't have any money, so maybe I can't be part of the collaboration.
Well, in speaking to the cooperative department, they said that people start with an investment as low as $50. It
Mhm.
depends on what you, but I would want to make it clear that in any business, you have to be prepared to invest.
Mhm.
And if you're going to be a business person, you can't start from the perspective that you expect some person outside of the scope of the business, like the government, to come to you and give you $100,000. Start start with the perspective that you have to find your investment, and you should put some skin in the game. For example, I try to assist people in forming whatever business they want to form. But over the years, I've developed the perspective that you shouldn't expect to get it for free. If I'm putting skin in the game by assisting you, you should be prepared to put some in too.
Mhm.
So while while there might be certain fees I can waive, you should be prepared to pay me a fee as well, because that's what business is about. If
Mhm.
you are going to get an investment from a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, an aunt, a grandmother, make sure that person gets a return on their investment. Even though it is true that they might say to themselves, man, just give her the money and Let she do what she like with it. You don't, they ain't putting any pressure on you. You as a business person should ensure that they get a return. And if they put in money, they should get a return of money. So you have to come and move with that kind of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I would say too about organizations, because I believe in organizations and I have every opportunity that I get to belong to an organization, I think it is important for me to be part of the organization and to function in the organization. So Barbados tends to have a culture where, and this is across the board, where they tend to elect people in organizations and then they take the position, I have nothing further to do. I went to the AGM, I elected the board. I went to the polls, I elected the government. I went to church, I elected the church. Church might be a bit different though, because I think there's a tradition and a culture that we understand. Maybe it's from the story of the widow's mite, but we seem to understand that we might participate. So you have different organizations, men's fellowship, people come and clean the church, and that kind of thing. So maybe we can even look at the church and see how they manage to do that. But there is this idea that when you elect your board or whatever, but then you don't do anything. And then people just sit and complain about the board. That isn't how an organization like this should function. This isn't how a cooperative should function. And I think one of the most important things from the outset is to choose the members wisely.
Mm-hmm.
You are looking for people to work with you who have passion, who have drive, who have determination, who will carry out tasks when they are allocated to them, who will say to you, no, I do not think I can do that because I actually have to do X at that time, or right now at the moment, I cannot do it. So you need people like that who will say, no, I cannot do it. Or if they begin to do it, they say, no, I cannot complete it,
Mm-hmm.
but here's what I have done. And might I suggest that I've spoken to X and they said that they're prepared to continue with it. So you need people like that. So you need people who are very professional, very upfront, and people who are mature. One of the other things that happens in organizations is that people spend a lot of time criticizing other people for the little failings that all of us as individuals have. We're not perfect. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be an individual who is going to come to your meeting and who's going to talk a lot. And basically, you understand that this person talks a lot. You've known this person for years, and you know that they talk a lot. Give them the opportunity to talk and then say, okay, we have to move on now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait till after the meeting and criticize the person and be on the phone and all that. Just be upfront with people. There are people who are going to come and they're not going to say much because there are people like that. They never say very much in their entire life. So don't expect them to come now and talk down the place when that is not them. There are individuals who I've met in organizations that people personally might not like them.
Mm-hmm.
So like you don't have to invite them to dinner, but there are some of these individuals who may even rub you the wrong way. But when you ask them to do something or do a project, they're going to sit down, they're going to write down their 5 things in their book. They're actually going to do the things, tick them off, and come back and report to you. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody like that, whether they rub you the wrong way or not, you need somebody like that in your organization. But
Mm-hmm.
I find that quite often we don't look at the value that people bring. We look at the 1 or 2 things that we don't like, and then we have a problem. Um, no, we have to rise above that. We have to rise above that when we're business. People who are successful in business, it isn't necessarily that they like each other. In fact, some of them dislike each other. That's a fact. They dislike each other, but they have this goal, and the goal may be to make money. So if they know that this person can deliver, whether they like them or not, they know that they're delivering. If there's a business dinner that has to be at the house, they invite them. They don't say, well, I never invited him to my home because it's business. Okay. When you're having a little birthday party for a daughter or a grandson or something, you don't have to invite them. But if it is agreed that there's to be a dinner because you have some investor from overseas, and it would be a good thing to give them a taste of Barbadian life and you want to have a dinner, well, yes, you invite them. So I find that sometimes many of the things which prevent us from collaborating, are really minor things that we have to rise above those things as a people and become a bit more mature in what we're doing.
Yeah. That's a very interesting point because I was going to ask you about that. What are some of the stumbling blocks to making cooperatives successful? And that's a very valid point in our Barbadian culture. As you said, we tend to focus on the things about someone we like. And in some instances, they don't like people because they get things done. And they feel it is a competition rather than a collaboration. So that's why we have those kinds of challenges. So I'm so glad that you brought those to the fore. What I want to talk about now is accountability. You touched on it, but what are some of the systems of accountability that need to be in place for the cooperative to be successful?
Well, I think that this is one of the great advantages of a cooperative because the ministry and the department for cooperatives provides an oversight role. And they will actually work with you if you're not used to, um, because some people might know how to do an income statement, but not everybody knows how to manage the investment when the investment comes in and how to record it and how to determine whether a dividend can be paid. You, of course, can engage professionals to do that, but the cooperative department will also provide assistance in that regard when you're starting out. This is why I think that this. I mean, I wasn't always sold on the cooperative because I used to say to myself, well, how is it different from a company where you invest in the company and get shares? But I recognize now that for our culture, this oversight role that the um, cooperative department plays is very important. So they're able to provide that oversight, they're able to provide guidance, and they're able to provide people to work with you in order to set up the systems to make you accountable. Because in terms of accountability, systems are very important. Your
Mm-hmm.
accountability should not depend on people. So when you develop a cooperative, you have to have in mind that this cooperative is going to exist for 200 years and it shouldn't be dependent on me. It shouldn't collapse because somebody is not able to function anymore. It shouldn't collapse because somebody decides to go overseas. It shouldn't collapse because somebody decides that I don't like fruit farming anymore. It should continue. So it's important the systems that you put in place. And the systems have to do with your proper accounting, ensuring that everyone in the business continues to invest, ensuring that everyone participates so that they continue to feel that they're a member. This is one of the things, even with the credit unions, that I'm wondering if they're losing that a bit. They've become so big that I wonder if members still understand that they own it. Those
Mm-hmm.
huge buildings are owned by the members.
Well, I was going
So,
to ask you about that because the credit unions have become so bureaucratized. You feel as though you don't have that personalized service or that level of ownership. It feels almost like a bank, like it belongs
well,
to somebody else, and you're just putting your money in.
yes, well, that is one of the things that I guess that is difficult with any large organization. But I really think, and I used to say this to them when I was Minister of Commerce, that they need to retain that and the members need to continue to understand and believe that they own it so that they're not at the mercy of the credit union. Really, they're the shareholders and the officials are
Mm-hmm.
employed by them.
Mm-hmm.
But I get the feeling that people don't really feel that way anymore. But I think it is in the interest of the credit union because the banks have always looked jealously on the credit unionists and they have believed that they had some advantage that they didn't have and they have sought to claw back on that over time successfully. So I think that is something that the credit unions need to bear in mind. And I cooperatives now who can see the history of the credit union movement and what has happened. It is
Mm-hmm.
important for if you're setting up a new cooperative to learn lessons from those who have gone before, which is something that we're not good at doing either. We make the same mistakes over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So it is important to look at them. But in terms of longevity, some of us have a difficulty with that too. Even though right now we're reaping mangoes from trees that we did not plant,
Mm-hmm.
picking coconuts from coconut trees that we did not plant. The person who planted them died and didn't get any. But some of us have a difficulty with putting things in place for another generation to benefit from. So I think that has to be the mindset. You're setting up this thing for long-term benefit for you as you get older, and eventually you will pass on. But it should still be there, functioning and getting better. Because my belief is that collaboration is the solution. I first started to think about this like around 2005.
Mm-hmm.
When at that time in 2005, what was happening is that the world was changing because of the enforcement of the World Trade Organization agreements. And as you would know, there were lots of barriers to trade that we had, and barriers tended to be high tariffs. So items coming into the country in order to protect our industries. You put a high tariff on the foreign imports. Now we had to remove a lot of those barriers. But as I was involved in negotiations and traveling around, what I came to recognize is that the developed countries could afford to do this because what they already had in place were private sector organizations that would actually be their barriers to trade. And you can't the barriers to trade have to do with government barriers, not private sector barriers.
Mm-hmm.
So the private sector in those, I mean, if you take for example in terms of the creative economy and you think about film, for example, no filmmaker from Barbados can just go into New York and start filming. You can't. You have to be a member of some guild or the other. There's the Actors Guild, the Writers Guild, etc. Those are private sector organizations. And often when individuals come here, they want to know is there not a requirement to interface with these associations? Of course, we don't have any such requirement. So in the developed world, their barriers are private sector. And I'm not saying that we should put barriers, but what they are concerned with is protecting their people, and they have to come together. The thing that struck me, and I don't remember which country it was, but I remember taking up a newspaper, and there was a big issue with pharmaceuticals, and I think they were. But let me. It may not be, but let me just guess. Suppose it were Canada. Um, and I opened the paper, there was a big ad from the Canadian Pharmaceutical Association talking about the fact that you could not rely on the pharmaceuticals coming in either from the US or Mexico. Okay. Their position was that we are manufacturing the genuine article and you can't trust those. Now, the government can't do that, but the private sector organization could do that. So they're discouraging their people from using these other pharmaceuticals that might come in, which they're saying are of an inferior brand because they might be cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
That's their position. The private sector can do that, the government can't. So
Mm-hmm.
that is why I started to think about organizations and collaboration. This is what is going to, I think, going to be important for us in Barbados in terms of developing businesses.
What are some of these skills that the cooperative members may not have? For example, maybe legal, taxation. I mean, what are some of these skills that you can outsource, for example, to make the cooperative stronger, so you get it right from the start? What do you suggest?
Well, luckily for the cooperatives, as I said, the first port of call is the Department of
Yeah.
Cooperatives, which you don't have to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
But you should also, I think, invest in that knowledge of what the cooperative means legally, what it means to operate legally, what does it mean to invest,
Mm-hmm.
um, what does it mean to get a return on your investment, to understand the bylaws, what it means in terms of, for example, if you're then going to make your will or whatever, how does your investment pass on to the next generation? Um, those are things that I think is important to understand. Because I mean, I was having a discussion recently with someone about the fact that some of the banks, when the person who has to interact with you, they are given a form and they would say to you, well, this is what is required. So the individual who's interfacing with you has a list of things that you're supposed to get. But I there was a situation once where a client called me. She had gone to the bank. She wanted to have an account, and they were asking her for no, they were saying to her that the other directors in her company had to sign on the account. And of course, that's not true. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing mandatory about you can have a board of 5 directors and you have your directors on for certain reasons. They don't all have to have signing authority on your bank account. So what I'm saying is that the bank did not take the time and opportunity to train the staff, which has to interact with the public in something
Mm-hmm.
as basic as understanding what it means to be a director on a board. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it doesn't cost a lot to, you know, because every organization really should have some kind of teaching opportunity at least once or twice a year for people within their organization, just so that everybody becomes, because sometimes when people do things that we are not um, happy with, it isn't because they're being difficult deliberately. It's because they actually don't know. They have not been educated in that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because running an organization for most people is a specialized area in terms of investment, etc. You may never you might have attended school diligently and just never have come across it unless you've done particular subjects.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a failing of any organization, including the cooperative, not to have some teaching opportunities. And there are individuals who would be happy to do this. I'm not saying to be always looking for a free nest, but some people will do it as a promotional opportunity for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there are individuals too who would take a small fee to put on these kind of seminars for any organization. The accounting too is very important. The accounting is very important. And many people, and you can have, when the organization is small, you can take on board an accountant and say to the accountant, we are small, we cannot afford to pay a lot at this time, but give us an outline of certain things that we should do, so that if you're going to get them to do an audit or to do the accounting work at the end of the year, it would not be difficult. So
Mm-hmm.
they can set up spreadsheets for you, and where you just put in the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if the organization is very small, I've known of situations where the accountant has just said to the person, okay, all of your receipts put in one envelope, all of your invoices you put in another envelope. Just put them in there.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't find time to do anything else. And then they would have everything in one place. But don't let it be a situation where you get a receipt, you put it in your pocket, you put it in your bag, you put it all kinds of different places. Then at the end of the year or the end of the financial year, you're scrambling. Put everything in one place. And either you do it using the technology, or if you're going to do it manually because you're into the technology,
Mm-hmm.
they can advise you as to what to do to set it up in such a way that when they come to do the accounting work for you, that it is easy to do. Because if it is easy, it will cost less. If they have to be looking through the checkbook and looking at an email that you got from somebody to order something and all that, and they have to spend more time, obviously it's going to cost more money. So depending on
Mm-hmm.
the organization, then they can come in once a quarter, they can come in half yearly, or they can just come in at the end of the year. But the thing is that you need to be talking to an accountant who is prepared to do that kind of work with you. And maybe someone who has a younger person who has recently set up their practice or something like that, who is willing and happy to grow with the organization and to learn with you. And as the organization becomes bigger, they will have a long-standing client who,
Mm-hmm.
when you do better and you prosper, their fees will also increase.
Mm-hmm.
So it is looking to, yeah, again, that is another form of collaboration where you can work along with somebody over time.
Okay. All right. Well, we only have about 4 minutes left. Lynette, can you tell me the three top things that you want people to take away from our chat? If they're, considering or if they want to set up a cooperative.
Well, as I indicated, I do believe that as as small countries and as small businesses, to collaborate for me is the solution. Um, and if you research it, you will see that there are huge cooperatives in the United States, in Canada, in European countries. This is something that businesses have used for years and have been successful. I believe a lot of fruit growers are cooperatives in the US and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So that is very important. The other thing that is very important is that I think that we need to come to terms with our culture and have a discussion about how our culture prevents us from doing well in business. I think we have to have that discussion, and we need to be honest with each other
Mm-hmm.
about our own failings, the things that prevent us from collaborating. Why is it that I remember hearing someone saying that they were part of a activity, and they say, well, I never joined an organization yet. They were very proud of that. I don't know why. To me, that's nothing to be proud of. If you
Mm-hmm.
had good skills, you should have been sharing those good skills with other people who are doing the same thing, and those people should be sharing with you, and everybody could just do better. So I think our culture is one of our biggest stumbling blocks where business is concerned. So I think we have to do that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think thirdly, the last the last issue that you raised in terms of accountability, putting proper systems in place, I think that those are very important. You have to run your organization properly. Make sure that there are more advantages in Barbados for business in terms of falling within the system than being out of the system, because
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of advantages for losses, there are a lot of advantages for seeking support, etc. But the one thing I would say is that when you go into business, your first thought has to be that it is your business. and that you're going to make an investment and that you have to put some money down, however small. When you go into business, your first thought should not be, does government provide support for this? Can I get money from some international organization? Because if your business has a purpose, if it has a purpose and you have a market, you should be able to make money. So if you can't make money, there's something wrong with your product at the outset that you have to think about. So those are my top things I think you should look at.
Lynn, I want to thank you so much for chatting with us. It has been very informative. I hope that this is not the last time that you're going to be on our podcast because there's so much more information that we need. And as we move forward, so many other resources that we're going to have to put on. And I hope that you will be one of them. Thanks so much again.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
You too, and this has been another edition of Know What. Join us again, where we're going to be having some more information about starting a business, getting involved in the business, and as Lynette very pointedly said, collaboration in business.